So for those that don't know Drupal, it's essentially software that people use to build websites. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation, of course. So let me tell you my story. So my story, or the Drupal story, starts in about 12 years ago, and this is me in my dorm room in Belgium, where I started the Drupal project. And as you can see, I was your typical geek. Had my assembly books, my chessboard, all my furniture was from Acquia, and so forth. So I basically had all of the checkboxes checked that you're looking for in any kind of geek. Now fast forward 12 years, and Drupal powers 2% of the web. It's actually a type. No, it's right. So 1 out of 5 websites, is basically built on Drupal. And we've built a very, very large, sorry, it's not 1 out of 5, it's 2%. And we've built a very, very large community of hundreds of thousands of people that are making a living, using Drupal. Our website, Drupal.org, gets over 2.5 million unique visitors a month. And that's quite remarkable and surprising for a pretty boring website, to be honest. It's not like we offer local news or anything like that. It's just a website about, Drupal. So what's special about Drupal, obviously, for those that don't know, is that Drupal is open source. So for those that don't know open source, it basically means you get 4 freedoms. The first freedom is the ability to run the program, meaning everybody can use Drupal for free, download it, install it, use it. You don't have to pay anything, right? But that doesn't make it any different from shareware. So in addition to that first freedom, there's additional freedoms that allow people to make changes to the program and to share those changes with other people. And in fact, we actually encourage that quite widely. So that's great because Drupal often wins because it's cheaper. There's no license fee. But more importantly, the open source license actually encourages collaboration. Collaboration translates into community, and ultimately, community leads to innovation. So if tens of thousands of people helping to build the software every day, and that just translates in massive amounts of innovation. I have some quick examples of some innovations that I would never have thought of, like Drupal bacon, Drupal soup that people make, pumpkins, as you can see. There's people that make Drupal socks, and then other people that actually wear them. There's people driving around naked with Drupal stickers on their ass. That's how passionate they are. Here's a guy in, I think it's Italy. I don't even know him, but he's like painting a Drupal icon logo. And people are, wearing spandex. People make Drupal beer, Drupal balloons. There's people with Drupal tattoos, quite a few actually. People make Drupal cookies. License plates, you name it. Chia pets. More people walking around crazy. But so just as an example of how passionate the Drupal community really is. And this is actually an interesting story as well, which I'll tell really quickly. But this is the Sheraton Hotel in Chicago. And so 2 years ago, we had a DrupalCon. We organized 4 of them each year. And so we went to the hotel and we said, we would like to rent every single room because we're expecting 3,200 people at DrupalCon. And so they said, well, all the rooms for a week, it's going to be about $1.4 million. And we said, great, we'll take it. And so we basically rented the entire hotel for the week. And in people's registration bags, we gave them Drupal pajamas. And so they could walk around day and night in the hotel. And they were actually coding at 4 a.m. in the morning. People would be in the lobby working on the software. And so we decided to supply them with ice cream and, and things like that. So lots and lots of passion in this community. And so I believe that building a large community, a large passionate community, can make the difference between something which is pretty boring, like, let's face it, most software, and something as passionate as Drupal. Of course, all that innovation, these were, of course, silly examples, but in the Drupal world, that innovation means plugins or extensions. We call them modules, and there's over 15,000 modules. And so that's really game-changing compared to our competitors. say, proprietary competitors, they may have 50 engineers on staff to work on the software. We have thousands. And so we're not only cheaper, we're also, better because so many people work on the software. Of course, that didn't happen overnight, and there's a lot of, stories in the Drupal world about how we got there. And I wanted to share you one because I think it's quite an important one. And it's sort of the big Drupal server meltdown. And it happened in 2005. When I started Drupal, I was a student, had no money. And so I couldn't afford a hosting account, frankly. And so I went to a friend and I said, hey, can I get a shell account on your server so I can host the Drupal.org website? And he gave me a shell account, and it was running on a server along with his customers' websites. And so by 2005, traffic to the Drupal website became, big enough that I needed to shift focus from actually working on Drupal to helping to scale the server and, making the software more efficient. But by 2005, somewhere in 2005, the server basically melted and it couldn't deal with the traffic. And so I'm like, what to do next, right? I had no money. And so I did some back of the envelope calculations, and I came out with a number, $3,000. And, we felt like if we had $3,000, we could buy a giant server, which would allow us to scale for many, many years to come, right? And so the only thing I could think of was basically to replace all of the pages on our website with a blank page with a PayPal button. And I added like one sentence, like, please chip in some money. We need to buy a new server. And so something amazing happened. Within 24 hours, people had contributed $10,000. And so for the, for the first 5 years of Drupal, people chipped in like $50 total. And so all of a sudden, within 24 hours, we get $10,000. Something else happened. The CTO of Sun Microsystems called up. And actually, PayPal blocked the account for suspicious traffic. And that's after I changed the password to be like this long, because I never had $10,000. Anyway, the CTO of Sun Microsystems called up and he said, hey, we're using Drupal, we love it, and we decided to send you an $8,000 machine. So, wow. And then somebody else called up, the OSL, it's the Open Source Labs. They host Mozilla and Linux, and they called up and said, if you provide the servers, we'll host you for free. And, free bandwidth, free hosting. And so here we are, 24 hours later. We got all this money, a server bigger than we needed, and free hosting. That's actually an important story because it was early signs of what a great community we were building. And I think it also meant a lot because I think the reason we have such a strong community is because we went through all of these joint growing pains and that we went through some joint suffering. And so I advise quite a few other open source projects and open source companies, and they often come to me and say, so how did you build such a large community? And the first thing I'll always tell them is maybe you should unplug the server and see what happens. But it worked for us. And I think it also demonstrates that open source usually is a little bit broken, but that it sometimes or often is for the better. Anyway, so open source wins because it's cheaper, and in the case of a large innovative community, it's actually better. But I actually think there is a bigger reason why open source will win in the long term. And that is, if you look at how technology evolves, and let's look at electricity. Right? It started with an innovation. This gentleman, Wollaston, he invented something which ultimately led to electric motors. And so that innovation later was turned into a bespoke system, like the Hippolyte Pixie. Eventually became a product, like a dynamo, and ultimately became a utility, like the electricity grid. So here's an example of how something evolved from an innovation to a commodity. Same thing is true with computers. If you think about compute power, the Z3 was an early innovation, ultimately transformed to things like the Leo, which were bespoke systems, to mainframes, which were products, to desktop computers, which are products. And I think ultimately, cloud computing will serve be the ultimate step, where compute power becomes a utility. Now, if you look at that in 2 dimensions, it looks a little bit like this, right? In each of those different steps, the reach of the technology becomes bigger and bigger. And I think the reason open source wins is because proprietary software is great for building products, but certain things need to be commoditized. And I think websites is one example. And I think it really takes an open source play to truly commoditize something which needs to be commoditized. And that's because there is no license fee, and because it's an open platform, and hundreds of thousands of people can get involved. And that's actually a bigger trend, and I think an unstoppable trend. I think open source is very disruptive, not only from sort of a development point of view and how we work together with lots and lots of people, but I actually also believe it's changing business models. We are changing our industry, and our proprietary competitors have no way to evolve to the same model. They could open source their code, but no way they're going to build a community fast enough to truly compete. And so, I started a company called Acquia. We provide a number of products and services around Drupal, but as an example of that business model innovation and the disruption in the existing market, we're only almost 5 years old, and we were just nominated by the Inc. 500 to be the fastest growing software company in the United States. So I think that's a real example of how open source allows the next generation of business models to be born as well. And it's really, truly powerful. So the other thing which is great about this is our ability to do good and to do well. So Drupal is used by many, many websites, right? From the whitehouse.gov running Drupal to Mitt Romney, to actually 130 other nations all around the world, to most of the top 100 universities, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, they're all running Drupal, to pretty much every artist in the world. Hundreds of artists, from Britney Spears to Justin Bieber, to the Rolling Stones, to Michael Jackson, you name them, but also a lot of nonprofits. I would guess a third of our install base is nonprofits. Amnesty, their main website runs Drupal. Greenpeace, Doctors Without Borders, all of these organizations and governments, they use Drupal to better fulfill their mission, to work with their base of users. And what's great about us as a company, Acquia, but also as a community, is that we can make a living, doing what we're most passionate about. And at the same time, indirectly, by giving back our software, we're also, indirectly helping all of these other organizations help change the world. And that's just something really, really rewarding to be part of. And so I feel like the story of Drupal, and I guess my story, only just started, and that we have many more pages to write. But I think in the long run, open source will be a winning play, and I think it will help change the world and make it a little bit better. So thank you.